Welcome to this installment of the VIP Test Modeler 101 training series. In this video we're going to be going through modelling some advanced scenarios. So let's jump into Test Modeler and start going through some advanced modelling. Okay, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go back into our Magento system and we're going to take a look at the registration page. We're then going to model this registration process and we're going to embed it into our master flow. Now, as part of that embedding process, what we're going to do is pass some parameters around. So when a new user registers, we're going to pass that into our login model and utilize the same data to have a successful login. So let's go into the Magento site here and let's take a look at creating an account. Now you'll see here there's a few input parameters. We've got a first name which is required, a last name which is required, an email address, which obviously must be of a specific format, a password, which again has some validation on here, a minimum length, and also a confirm password. And then we can create an account and go through the sign up. So we're going to firstly start modeling this page. So in Test Modeler, let's create a new model and we'll call this registration. Click OK, and let's open this model up. So here we have our blank canvas. Now, just like before, I'm going to add a start block here. Okay, so I'm thinking about the start points into our page. And then also I'm going to add the endpoints from our page. So here we can either end up registered, which is our kind of happy scenario, or we end up not registered. Now, everything in between these is what is the scenarios that we're going to model to represent how we get to these two end states. So the first action we need to think about is the first name. So we'll add a condition in here for that. And we'll call this first name valid. Now, if this is true, what we'll do here is we'll input a valid first name. Now, the level of granularity we're hitting here is quite abstract. We're just dealing with invalid and valid data combinations. What you could also do is you could have these as sub-processes. So, we could model what constitutes a valid first name or what constitutes an invalid first name. Obviously, this is beyond the scope of what we want to do here. We're going to keep it quite simple, but this is perhaps something that later on we might want to come back and add into our model. Okay, so if we enter an invalid first name, what's going to happen here is we're going to get a first name error. And then we'll end up not registered. Okay, so we're splitting the logic off here. And this is how we're going to construct our model. So we probably just need to make this a little bit wider just as we're going through. So I'll just move these over to the right a little bit and move this up to make a little bit more space. Now the next field we need to consider is the last name. So same process again. I'm going to ask if the last name is valid. I've got a decision here. If it is valid, I'm going to input a valid last name. And if it is not valid, we'll input an invalid last name. As so. We'll branch the logic off here again. We'll set our labels in our model. And we should get an error message here. Last name error. And again, we'll branch this off so that we end up not registered if we go down this path. I'm just going to do a bit of rearrangement here. So now the next field we need to consider, if we go back to our website here, is the email address. So let's add a new decision here for the email. And now we've got a few different classes of what constitutes an invalid email. So the valid email case is pretty simple. We'll just say input valid email. For the invalid email, we're going to have a couple of additional edge cases. So we're going to have an email without the @ symbol. And we're going to have another edge case here, which is an email without a qualified name. And we'll connect these up. Again, we could go deeper into this and actually model what a valid and invalid email looks like. But to keep this simple and abstract, we're just sticking with these three kind of equivalence classes. Okay, then we should get an email error if we enter any of these two negative values into our email. And again, we'll end up not registered. Now, the next field we need to consider, just move this over a little bit, is the password. And we'll split this off into two for simplicity's sake. So we'll input a valid password, and we'll have a state down here where we can input an invalid password. Like so. And we'll connect these up. So this is true. This is false. And again, we should get an error message if we input an invalid password. So we'll call this password error. Now, our model's getting a little bit bigger than I thought it would, so I'll just move these over a little bit. And again, we need to connect this up to the not registered endpoint if we get a password error. And the final field we need to consider here is the password confirmation. So we'll hook this up. So, and if we go down here where we don't have a confirmed password, we're going to enter a non-matching password. Otherwise, we'll enter a matching password. As so, and we'll connect this up. So we've got our false case down the bottom here, our negative scenario, and we've got our true case up the top here, our positive scenario. And now we have kind of our happy path complete, and we have our error scenario down here where we end up not registered. So this is, quite an abstract model which is going to go through our registration process. So we'll click save here, and we're just going to go in and we're going to do a generate just to take a look at what these paths look like. Let's come back with 7 paths. Let's take a look at these. We've got our happy scenario up the top here, which is passing through, entering valid inputs into all of these. Now, where the real power comes in here are the 6 other scenarios, which are testing our negative edge cases here, or our negative scenarios through the system. Now I've got this, I need to go in and start creating some test data. So we'll go into the test data variables, and we're going to create a few variables here. We're going to create one for the first name, one for the last name. We're going to create an email. We're going to create a password, and then we're going to have our password confirmation variable also, and we'll hit save. Now we need to set these throughout the model, so we'll just zoom in a little bit here, and the first one we're going to do here is the valid first name. So we'll click add, we'll select our first name variable, click the edit button here, click equals, and here we're going to go down and create a synthetic first name. So I'll select this expression here which creates first names, click add, that'll get added to my model. We're going to add an invalid first name. Now for the invalid first name, we're going to leave this as empty. So we'll just type in equals and 2 quotation marks, and this will tell Test Modeler that this variable will be set to an empty value. We'll click save. We'll do the same for the invalid last name here. So, and we'll add a synthetic value for the valid last name. So let's go in here, click equals, and we'll select the last name synthetic data generation function. We'll add this, as so, click save. Now we've got a few edge cases for our email. So we'll go through and we'll do the happy scenario first, so our valid email, click equals. If I go to the internet function list here, we'll see there's a function to generate synthetic emails. So we'll click add there, hit save. Now we've got our two equivalence classes. So an email which does not contain an @ symbol. So we can just enter a piece of static data for that. And then we've got an email which does not have a qualified name. We'll click add here and we'll give this a value like @curiosity.software. So it does not have a fully qualified name at the beginning. And we'll hit save. Now we need to do the same here for a password, so a valid password. And we're going to use another synthetic data generation function here. And this time we're just going to create a random string with a fixed length. Click add the function. Now if we go in here, we'll see that the minimum length for this is 8. So what we will do here is we will state our length as 10. We'll include numbers and we'll discount special characters here. And we'll click save. And that's going to generate a string of length 10 containing numbers. We then need to generate an invalid password. So for this, what we will do is create a password which is under 10 characters. So we'll use our random string fixed length expression again. We'll create a value of 5 and we'll have it containing numbers and special characters and hit save. Then the only field we've got left here is to input a matching password. Now this is a bit more interesting. So we'll go to our password confirmation variable, hit edit, and this time we're not going to use any expressions, we're going to use the password that was set previously. So we're going to take the value from that password variable, we'll hit insert reference, and we'll see this is now referring to the password variable. And we'll hit save. For a non-pass matching password, what we'll do here is we will generate a random string. So we'll use our random string fixed length function and we'll apply a valid password here. So we'll set this to true for both. And that's it. We've got our test data defined across the model here. So we'll hit save. We'll do a regenerate with our 7 paths. And let's download the data sheet just to have a look and make sure we're happy with all of the data that's being set. So we'll open our data template here. So I'll enable editing in the spreadsheet. We'll go to the data sheet at the bottom here and let's take a look at our values. So here we've got our first names, our last names, our email addresses, our passwords, and our password confirmations. Now I can see a problem here where our password confirmation is not being set. It's only got the valid value here, which is where it's taking the value from our password field. So let's just take a quick look at that and see what's going on. So I'll go into my test data, click on assignment, click the edit button here. And what we'll see is that actually we're setting this value to the wrong variable. So this should actually be set to password confirmation. So we'll hit save. Everything else in my sheet here I'm pretty happy with. So we're good to go with this flow. So I'll just close this sheet. Let's go back into Test Modeler. And now what we're going to do is we're going to chain this into a much larger process where we're using our login flow. So we'll create a new model here and we'll call this authentication. And we'll click OK. And now we're going to bring in our login and registration flows. So we'll hit the start button here, bring in a start block. Then we're going to bring in a sub-process. And the sub-process I want to bring in firstly is going to be our registration system. So I'll click import and we'll link that in. We're then going to add in our login subflow that we created previously in the series. So I'll import that. Now I'm going to bring a connection between these two. Now what I want to connect is when we're registered, I want to connect into my login. Okay. If we're not registered, then I'm going to go off to my endpoint here and I'll select not registered. And this is where our endpoint is going to be not authenticated. So these are our negative paths. We'll connect the negative paths from the login screen into this endpoint as well. And then we'll have another endpoint at the end here, which is going to be authenticated. Now obviously these contain their own, worlds of logic inside here. By having this subflow concept inside Test Modeler, it allows me to abstract away from what's actually going on in these flows. Now I'm just going to save this. Now what we actually want to happen here is when we register a new user, we want to pass those credentials and use them inside our login system. At the moment, what's going to happen is it's going to use the test data variables, which is set throughout the login model, which obviously is not the behavior we want. So to get that behavior, what we're going to do, we're going to go into test data variables, and we're going to add two variables. The first one being registered username, and this is going to be a type of variable called subflow mapping. Now what this is going to do is go into the subflow, and it's going to pick out the variable value. So the variable value we're interested in here is the email address. So this variable is always going to be set to the email that has been set in the registered flow. So I'll click save on that. And now we need to do the same again with the registered password. So we'll create a new variable, subflow mapping type. And this time we're going to map to the password variable inside our registration process, as so. And we'll hit save. We'll just copy our identifier name here, and we'll save this. Now what we're going to do is go into the login, we'll right click on the properties, and we're going to inject our variables in here. So we'll start off with the equals and the square brackets, we'll paste our value in, and we'll do the same with the password here as well. So what this is going to do is it's going to take our values from the registration sub-process, which we've mapped inside our master flow, and then it's going to inject these and pass them into our login flow. So I hit save. We'll save the model again. It's good practice to keep on saving. And then we'll perform a generate. And we'll see this has come back with 10 paths, as so. Now what I'm going to do here is click the download button. We're going to download our datasheet. And let's take a look at the values inside here. Okay, so the row I'm really interested in here is this row 7, which is where we go through the login page and we do a successful registration. Now, if we take a look at the registered email and password here, these are what were created in the registration flow. And when we do our login here, we're logging in with the same email, and crucially, we're logging in with the same password as well. If we look under the covers here, you'll see it's referencing the values which have been passed in. Now the reason this has worked is because we've set our subflow parameters, and we've also extracted the values from the registered username and password. So here we have it. We now have a full end-to-end flow which is performing authentication by passing around subflow variables using parameters. Thanks for watching this video. Any questions, please email james.walker@curiosity.software.